Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from @AKwx TV to @NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Okay, first graphic up, breakup map here, and starting to break up here along the Yukon River from Fort Yukon on down the ways there, and got some flood watches out in this area as well, and we've got otherwise some open back in toward Eagle, and mostly to some open now, Tanana River, still pretty iced up here in the west, and of course up to the north there. And then the Kuskokwim River has some breakup going on along it there south of Sleep Mute with some watches in that area as well. So moving on to the chart here, the hazardous weather graphic, there's the flood watch for tonight through tomorrow for the Yukon River there in areas, and also a flood watch for the Kuskokwim River there south of Sleep Mute on down toward Aniak or so. And that's for tonight until tomorrow for possible flooding in both of these areas. Otherwise, a wind advisory out for the Alaska Range, and that's for tonight through tomorrow, and looking for winds gusting anywhere from, well, up to about 65 miles an hour in gusts. Otherwise, looking at sustained winds of 25 to 40 miles an hour from the south and southeast there. And then back out here to the west again, the red shaded area, winter storm warning out, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. Believe it or not, 4 to 7 inches of new snow expected, with winds gusting from the north-northeast up to 60 miles an hour, and that'll create whiteout conditions, or at least visibility is possibly as low as a quarter mile at times in blowing snow. And then a winter weather advisory here for the north side of the Seward Peninsula, of course Shishmaref and the northwest coastal areas. That's out for tonight and tomorrow as well. Conditions not as bad as in the warning area here, but still looking at, I believe, anywhere from 4 to 6 inches of snow there, with northeast winds gusting to 45 miles an hour and blowing snow, reduced visibilities at times to a half mile or less in that area. Again, that's tonight through tomorrow. So moving on to satellite imagery, you can see a pretty good storm here coming northward. Bright band of clouds in over most of the southwest interior, well, all of the southwest interior, at the front trailing down across Bristol Bay. Clouds on the increase across Kodiak Island today. North winds behind that, colder air coming south and southeastward here behind that, and then southerly flow in advance of that, starting to kick the winds up as this front came through. Pretty strong winds occurred at places like, Port Hayden had winds gusting up to about 68 miles per hour for peak wind gusts there. Cape Newnham, 64 miles per hour there, with over nearly 2 inches of rain falling today, and about an inch falling over toward, I think it was Togiak. Dillingham picking up half an inch of rain. Falls Pass also picking up half an inch of rain there, with lighter amounts, of course, back to the west there. Dry over the eastern interior, a lot of clear skies today. Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, all of the Panhandle today. Sunshine, temperatures mid-60s to near 80. Warmest down toward the south there. And more clouds, kind of keeping a little cooler up here over the eastern interior, but still rising into the 60s this afternoon. And rolling that through again colder air back up here to the northwest, keeping temperatures in the upper 20s in some areas out along the coastline there into the mid-afternoon hours with rather gusty winds. That cold air kind of interacting with the moisture here, and that's going to produce that snow and blowing snow situation for the St. Lawrence Island area up to the northwest coast tonight through tomorrow. Otherwise, on the chart here, that low coming northward, 1,003 millibars front, bringing the strong winds, areas of heavy rain with it. Again, Togiak picking up about an inch in the last 12 hours. Cape Newenham close to 2 inches. And let's see, Dellingham, as I mentioned, about a half an inch. And with also up into the Cuscomb Valley, some pretty good rainfall. Sleepy picking up half an inch today as well. More showery activity, maybe some steady precipitation on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. A little bit of moisture, not too much though, up into the Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound. Mostly just clouds there. Winds on the increase here, but as this gradient tightens, and the high shifts off to the east a little bit, but it's not going to give away too much. This front will weaken. You see tonight moves upwards. That does nudge it eastward just a little bit, but clear skies for the southeast coast, mild overnight low temperatures into the eastern interior as well with light winds. And snow blowing snow back here to the northwest over the northern Bering Sea, western Seward Peninsula. Snow for the western Brooks Range, areas of the North Slope out to the eastern Arctic coast, extending all the way down to the Pribilof Islands now. And some rain and snow with this trough here for the eastern and central Aleutians. Rain and snow showers, Alaska Peninsula. More widespread moisture here with southwest flow, keeping it pretty wet there over the coastal areas into Bristol Bay. And again, that pushing up into the Cuscomb Valley areas. And for tomorrow, cool and damp here in the western part of the state, especially out along the coast. Still pretty windy with snow and blowing snow, St. Lawrence Island, back up to the northwest coast, especially through the Bering Strait there. And precipitation lightens up and becomes a little more scattered, more showery into the central interior. Mostly cloudy skies, though, or variably cloudy with some hazy sun still over the eastern interior. Sunny for the Panhandle. A day tomorrow, much like today. And a risk of some moisture there for Kodiak Island. And then for Wednesday, the system hangs up over the southwest coast there, so weakens as well. And the front gone, just a trough up to the northeast, another one back here to the south, not all that strong, keeping it showering and settled for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas. Increasing sunshine, call it for south central Alaska on Wednesday. Showers mostly over toward the western Alaska Range. Maybe Talkeetnas could see a few showers, but mostly sunny for the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, eastern southeast interior, and sunshine, warm temperatures for the Panhandle, high pressure building over the western Bering Sea. So no big storms entering the picture here. This high keeping any of that off to the west in the Sea of Okhotsk or to the southwest. Low temperatures tonight, mid-30s for the Copper River Basin, otherwise lower 40s everywhere else, except into the lower to mid to upper 30s for Bristol Bay, near 40 Kodiak Island, and pretty nice here in the Panhandle, mid-40s to lower 50s for the lows. Highs tomorrow, 70s south, 70s north, and 60s in between for the Panhandle, and 60s for the Copper River Basin, 50 to 55 south central Alaska, and 45 to 55 for the Cuscomb Valley. Kodiak Island looking at about 49. And for the low temperatures the following morning, 30s to lower 40s here southern Alaska, mostly in the 40s to near 50 over the Panhandle, followed by highs. A little cooler down here, still approaching 70. Warmer temperatures now appear to be up here to the north. 70 to 75, 6 or 7 up toward Skagway, Haines, Juneau area. Markedly cooler, though, for Yakutat, upper 50s there, 50 to 55, south central Alaska, lower 60s in the Copper River Basin, and 40s to lower 50s west of the Alaska Range. Lows tonight, 30s to lower 40s central interior, 20s for the Brooks Range, 15 or teens for the Arctic coast. Highs 70, 75 far eastern areas, near 70 for Fairbanks, 20s and lower or 20s and 30s for the Seward Peninsula, and 20s for the Arctic coast and North Slope. Lows 30s, and north of the Brooks Range, though, in the teens for the lows, and then highs about the same here. 70s look like they're getting pushed off toward Eagle, and that's about it. Otherwise, still chilly out there toward the Bering Strait, and mid to upper 20s for the Arctic coast. Out in the southwest tonight, Pribilofs low upper 20s, otherwise 30s for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and the southwest coast. And then the highs for Tuesday afternoon, in the 30s along the coast, lower 30s for the Pribilofs, and 40 to 45 for the Aleutians. A little bit cooler, near 40 actually, AKwx and Shemya. And then the lows back into the lower to or mid 30s for the Aleutians, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, mid 20s St. Lawrence Island, highs about the same.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather, of course, south of North Flow here, pulling moisture along that frontal boundary. So a lot of IFR here over the Yukon and western Kuskokwim Delta, Nunivak Island. And then wrapping back around there right into Togiak Bay, Dillingham, and up into the Kuskokwim Valley. Marginal VFR, eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, east side, the Kenai Peninsula, also possibly in the Resurrection Bay, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast. Good VFR, eastern interior, including the Copper River Basin, right on down into the Manuska and Susitna Valley. Big area of IFR here, Brooks Range, northern Koyukuk Valley, on up to the eastern Arctic coast. And some IFR right here, northern Seward Peninsula, in across Togiak, or not Togiak Bay, Selawik Valley area. VFR for the Panhandle, marginal for the Aleutians. And then for Tuesday afternoon, no change out here for the Aleutians. Marginal VFR still in sway, and right up into Togiak Bay. VFR now, Bristol Bay, and most of Kodiak Island, except along the central and south coast areas. And more VFR over the interior here, still some spotty areas of marginal VFR over this mountainous terrain. Good over the central eastern interior. Big area of IFR now, eastern Arctic coast, across the North Slope, cutting down across the western Brooks Range. And right through the Bering Strait there, across St. Lawrence Island, into the Yukon Delta to the Pribilofs. And solid VFR for the southeast coast. That continues into Wednesday here for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast. Good conditions over the interior, and IFR still North Slope, eastern Arctic coast, out to the western Arctic coast there, and through the Bering Strait and hanging onto the Yukon Delta. Good IFR there, right on down across Nunivak Island, and into western Kuskokwim Bay, but north of St. Matthew Island. Pribilofs there, right on the southwestern edge of the marginal VFR, with good VFR off to the west and southwest there, covering Adak and Atka. Back to marginal VFR for the western Aleutians. Marginal VFR up into Prince William Sound. Coastal areas of the Kenai Peninsula, southern Cook Inlet, mostly Kamishak Bay. Kachemak Bay, though, VFR in the morning, and good over the interior. And that continues into Wednesday afternoon. Less IFR up here north of the Brooks Range, and less here, but still into the Yukon Delta, Kuskokwim Bay area, Nunivak Island, but a lot smaller than it was. And good VFR over the interior, possible marginal VFR here. Western Cook Inlet, down into Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island, and the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. VFR, Copper River Basin. VFR for the Panhandle, and then for passes tomorrow. IFR at times for both Anatuvik and Adigan there in the Brooks Range. Coming down to the western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill. Look for marginal VFR, both passes, especially on the eastern entrance. Rainy, marginal VFR, especially east side. And for Rainy, marginal VFR, especially south side. And Isabel, though, VFR. Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. And Portage, marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR for the next several days, actually, for those two passes. Freezing levels, upper level high pressure building here over western Canada. Really warm air aloft now, 12 to 14,000 feet there across the Panhandle, and 4,000 feet well into the central interior. Cooler out here to the west, 2,000 feet just south of the Aleutians. And icing with that moisture flow and the boundary here between the cooler air to the west and the warmer, or the cooler air to the west, warmer to to the east, south to north flow. So areas of isolated moderate rime icing possible from the Arctic coast through the western interior. Most of the eastern Bering Sea here, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Alaska Peninsula, and jet stream showing that south to north flow. The main jet here right up across south central Alaska, actually near Prince William Sound, in across the western Alaska Range and central Alaska Range into the interior, about 90 knots there. Good flow here at 9,000 feet as well. North, 40 knots, the backside of that low, light for the panhandle, and 3,000 feet here, low center right along the Yukon Delta coast, 45 knot winds coming across the southwest interior, 45 to 60 knots there across St. Lawrence Island, and lighter down here to the south. Eastern interior pretty light, as well as the panhandle. Turbulence, moderate turbulence, western interior down to the Alaska Peninsula and over the mountainous terrain of south central Alaska. Also St. Lawrence Island up to the western Arctic coast.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, you know, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but, you know, since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show. How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white. How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a creature, would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but is covered by snow, a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice? All three of these are white. The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white. And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there, but otherwise there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical. That at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. You know, visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savunga or Gamble and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there. Visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but it has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who are trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert, there's a great image of this same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Marine forecast here for the southeast coast. On the south coast, northwesterlies, 20 knots, 6-foot seas. North coast, west-northwest, 10 to 15 knots. And for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage, look for northwest winds on Tuesday. Pretty light at about 10 knots, seas probably 2 feet or so. And Clarence Strait, northwest of 15 with 3-foot seas. And for Wednesday, outlook for Wednesday, not much change here. Northwesterlies at 20 knots continue for the south coast, west-northwest 15 for the central and north areas, and variable winds 10 knots for the central and northern inside water areas, Clarence Strait, northwest of 15. Prince William Sound. Variable to southeast breeze at 10 knots for the day Tuesday, and south winds 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast here. And for the Barren Islands, south winds at 20 knots. Kamishak Bay, south winds 20 knots. Cook Inlet, southern Cook Inlet, south winds 20 knots. Northern Cook Inlet, southeast of 15, seas 5 feet. And for Wednesday, Cook Inlet, southwest at 10, south 15 for Kamishak Bay, variable at 10 with 4-foot seas for the Barren Islands. And for the North Gulf Coast, winds stay light, west-northwest or west-southwest at 15, seas not too bad at about 4 feet. And Prince William Sound, light winds, mostly out of the west at 10. Kodiak Island, southwest at 20 for Tuesday, 6 to 7-foot seas. Bristol Bay, south at 20. South winds 20 knots, mostly here for the Alaska Peninsula, 5 to 7-foot seas. And for Wednesday, west winds 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, west at 10, and Kodiak Island, mostly southwest. Winds mostly southwest at 15 knots with seas 3 to 5 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, northwesterlies tomorrow, 20 to 25 knots, strongest near Nikolsky. And Adak and Atka, northwest 25, that extends out to about Kiska, then lighter, more north to northeast winds, 15 to 20, Kiska to Shimia. And for Wednesday, Kiska out toward Shimia, east-southeast at 15, otherwise northwest 15 on Chitka Island. And for the central and eastern Aleutians, pretty uniform wind pattern there from Adak eastward down Alaska Island, all northwest at 20 knots with seas running 6 or 5 to 8 feet. And for the southwest coast, kind of varying here, south of Nunivak Island, south winds at 30 knots, Yukon Delta coast, northeast at 15, east at 20 for St. Lawrence Island. Brisk wind advisory, though, or actually small craft advisory now that the ice is gone in Norton Sound, or mostly gone. There's still some probably floating around there, but call it east at 25, seas 5 feet. Gale warning, St. Matthew Island, north winds 35 knots, northwest at 25 for the Pribilofs. And for Wednesday, St. Paul, St. George, St. Matthew Island, all northwest at 25, and south of Nunivak Island, southwest at 20, Yukon Delta coast, south at 15, and east-southeast, 15 knots for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. For the eastern and central coast up here, look for northeasterlies at about 15. Western Arctic coast, brisk wind advisory northeast at 25 knots. Gale warnings for the Chukchi Sea for northeast winds or north to northeast at winds at 30 to 40 knots. And lighter winds in store for that area on Wednesday, mostly east to northeast, but down to 15 to 20 knots here. Western Arctic coast, east at 15, southeast at 10 for the central coast. Pretty good there. East at about 15, not too bad for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, dry and variably cloudy over the central and eastern interior, most of the clouds west here. And this storm bringing blizzard warnings, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast here tonight, and wind advisories for the Alaska Range, and for gusts of 65 miles an hour tonight through tomorrow. And this front, increasing moisture and wind also for south central Alaska. Winds getting pretty gusty and unsettled back to the Alaska Peninsula. Tomorrow, another sunny, warm day for the southeast coast here. Again, temperatures in the mid-60s to near 80. And a little more clouds over the eastern interior. Still mostly dry, especially north of the Alaska Range. Chance of some moisture in the Copper River Basin, south central Alaska. Definitely cloudy and cool out in the western areas. And that pattern holds through Wednesday, but a little bit more sunshine farther to the west.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.